All right, ladies and gentlemen, today I have a special video I want to share with you all. There is a project called Create V3 App, which was built by one of my Discord users named Daria. If you're on my Discord, you probably have seen him around. And he really likes Vue, but he decided to build out basically the T3 stack, which is what you see on my channel very often, but he decided to use it in Vue. So instead of using Next, he uses Nuxt. Instead of using React Query, he's using Vue Query. He has Prisma, he has TRPC, he has something called Open Props that I'm not really aware of what it does. I believe there's a Next Auth equivalent for Vue. And there's some other things that the V3 stack will provide you out of the box. I think he spent a lot of time with like making the router be typed, and it has like icons built into it. So what I like to do in this video is set up a V3 app, show you how easy it is to hit the ground running, and just play around with it a little bit. I have not done this yet. I've been kind of meaning to do this. So let's just go ahead and do get started. And I'm going to go ahead and do the npm create v3 app at latest. And let's just go over to my workspace. I will go ahead and run it. And let's just go ahead and name it my v3 app here. So similar to the T3 stack setup, this will basically set up a project folder. It'll initialize a Git repo, ask you if you want to do npm install. A little Easter egg, if you select Tailwind, it actually says you can't use Tailwind. So this user really dislikes Tailwind. I think he, there's some things that he likes about Tailwind, but a lot of the things he thinks you can just do with vanilla CSS, which I think is which is cool. I like vanilla CSS. So then it asks you, would you like to add CVA UI? I honestly don't know what this is. I'll just go ahead and say yes. I think it's probably just a bunch of like baseline components. They kind of explain it to you. I went ahead and clicked yes. And now it's installing a bunch of dependencies down here. And while that is setting up, I want to just kind of point out, this is the URL for the V3 app. If you ever wanted to go to the repo, go ahead, check it out, give it a star. Feel free to talk to Daria on the Discord and see if there's ways you can contribute. If you like Vue and you like some of this tech stack that's being used in this project. Now I did want to kind of check out what Open Props is. I'm not really sure what this is. I think it's basically, you get a bunch of CSS variables out of the box that you can kind of use in your CSS styles. But going off of what he says, he seems like he knows a lot about the Vue ecosystem, and he thinks that this is a good solution. So might be worth investigating and looking into. But as you can tell, this is a work in progress. Like as down here, it says like to do. He kind of like spent, I think, a couple of days or like a week kind of working on this, I believe. Now I will say the npm install does take quite a while. I think I probably should have used yarn or pnpm. It probably would have been a lot faster than npm. All right, it's finally done. Let's just go ahead and cd into that directory. And then we're going to run the next steps, which will basically set up our SQLite database to have the schema that we care about. And then I'm going to open that directory. So let's just go ahead and open, I'll say code, reuse, open this directory. All right, and then we are going to run the project. So npm run dev, that'll spin up the Nuxt application. And I can go ahead and open up my browser to this URL. And there you have it. You have the V3 stack application, all with Nuxt and Vue and all of the other goodies that are included in this. I think some cool things that he did include was he included like hooks that you can basically use for dark mode and light mode. And he also included internationalization. So I do believe he is from France, and he added some, language support for French, I believe. And he also has English here. So that's pretty cool. If you ever want to kind of learn how that works, check out this project and look at the internationalization. I believe it's also called I18N. He also provides Nuxt Auth out of the box, so you can kind of use that. But I wanted to kind of play around with it. Let's see if we can make like a really simple to-do list application. What better way to learn a new library / framework / setup than to build a to-do list application? So the folder structure, I mean, if you look at the docs that he has, he kind of outlines the folder structure here. If you want to get a better understanding of like what these different folders are and what the files are in those folders. But we're going to wing it, and we're going to kind of just dive through here and see. So with Nuxt, it's very similar to Next, where you have a pages directory, and every file you have is going to basically be a route in your application. So inside of index.vue, this is the view that we saw earlier. It has like all the information about the features of this stack. And out of the box, it tells you how to do internationalization, which is pretty cool. I've actually never done internationalization before, so that'll be something new that I'll have to look at. And then he has post CSS for the language, which I guess is importing open props, which gives you access to do different things like this. You can specify the max width by using a CSS variable here, which I believe is set to, it looks like 1024. It's pretty cool. But yeah, what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and get rid of the internationalization because we're going to make this just in English. And we are going to go ahead and try to just delete as much of the stuff we can here and just play around with Vue a little bit. If you haven't used Vue before, it's actually pretty easy to hit the ground running, and it has a lot of similarities to like most other frameworks like React or Svelte, and a lot of like reactive things. I know signals are like all the hype now on Twitter, but I think Vue has had basically reactive features out of the box for many, many years now. All right, let's also just go ahead and get rid of like all this stuff. Get rid of that, the internationalization. Not really sure if we want to do that right now. I'm too tired to learn something new. But at the very least, we can keep like the section. That'd be pretty cool. We'll keep the section. We got rid of all the stuff in the template, and now we're also going to get rid of the Nuxt auth. Like I'm not going to worry about Nuxt auth stuff yet. So we should have a page that says hello world. Let's just go ahead and go over here and make sure that it says hello world. It looks like there's already a header and a footer that's provided for us. So let's look at how does that happen? Well, there is a layouts directory. And inside of that, you have a default layout, which will be applied to every page in your application. So right here, he has a header kind of built out, and he has some footer built out as well. And here is the, if you're not familiar with what a slot is, it's basically like children in React, where you can kind of put things in that are passed in. A slot is the same, right? You can basically slot in the component, and Nuxt basically does that. It basically takes your page component and is going to slot it in right here. So if you're curious of how like the internationalization works, he has a custom hook, I believe, here, which can switch it from English to French, vice versa. And then he also has a dark mode toggle. You can kind of dive into that. Actually, what does dark mode toggle come from? So there's a dark mode toggle. I am kind of confused how this thing is even accessible. I guess this thing is declared automatically inside of a components.d.ts file. I'd have to kind of read more about that, but somehow this thing is magically a global now. You don't even need to import it. Not sure if I'm a fan of that. I kind of like having to put explicitly the imports everywhere, but I don't use Vue much, so I'm not really sure. Anyway, let's just go back. Can we make like a little to-do list application? So we're actually going to try to connect with like the backend and stuff with Prisma and the tRPC. So we're going to do a full front end, back end, full stack thing with the V3 setup. But I'm not going to spend a lot of time. I don't have much time to make this video, but I'm going to go ahead and just make a form, and we're going to add an input, and then we're also going to add a button that says submit. Okay, now in the input, I'm just going to go ahead and say like your to-do item. And we want to basically listen for when someone is typing into this. So in Vue, you can kind of create something called a ref if you want to kind of bind when the user types and store that somewhere, right? So I'll just go ahead and make like a const to-do text is equal to ref, set it equal to an empty string. This is the same as like doing a use state. This is kind of similar to like a ref in React and also like a state variable in React. It's basically like, I believe, a proxy object, and when you change the value of this thing, it's going to go ahead and re-render and update your form here. So if I were to go ahead and put :value, I believe I can pass the do text here, and I think that's going to basically two-way bind those things, right? So if I go back to the page, notice that whatever I had in state is automatically put right here. It's like a two-way binding. And I also believe if I type into this, let me just verify and make sure I'm not teaching you something bad. If I were to try to interpolate this out to the page, actually, I think I'm doing something wrong. I think I have to say view model, vmodel. That's how you do a two-way binding. So now if I type here, there you go. Now it's working. So that's something cool about Vue. Some people don't like the whole idea of two-way binding. They rather have like a strict one-way data flow, but I think it's pretty nice here. Now, secondly, what I'm gonna do is when you submit this form, I want to kind of send some data off to the backend. How do I do that? Well, I can say on submit. I put an @ symbol here. I'm also gonna say .prevent. Actually, I don't remember if it's at submit or on submit. My React brain is inflating with my Vue brain right now. But let's just try this out. I'm gonna go ahead and say like, I'll call it handle submit form. How about that? Super verbose. Why not? And I will go ahead and put that function there. So I think when I submit the form, if I were to do a console log and say like hello, this should print out hello to my terminal down here. There we go. Okay, so now if you want to get the value of that to-do, you can actually say dot value here. This is how you kind of get the value of your ref object in Vue. So now if I do this and click submit, it prints out the actual value down here. Now, what else do we want to do? Actually, I don't think I told you. This dot prevent, this is going to basically prevent the forms from submitting. You know how in React you have to say e.prevent default? Well, Vue's pretty nice, and they gave you like a way to kind of just do it out of the box, right? Because they care about the developer experience. Okay, so now what we're trying to do is I want to submit that data somewhere, right? When you submit the form, I want to send off the data. How do we do that? Well, remember, we have a Prisma set up, and we also have TRPC. So I'm going to go ahead and go to the server, TRPC router, and this is where you can set up your TRPC router stuff. In this case, he is making a router endpoint called title. Let's just go ahead and add one, and we're going to call it, we're going to call it create to do. Okay, and this is going to be a TRPC procedure, like so. I'll say mutation, and I think I also want to put an input here. So I'll say dot input, and let's just go ahead and say we want to pass in some text, and I believe that needs to be a Zod string. Now let's go ahead and pass this a callback, and let's make sure this works. Actually, I think it's called z.object, and then I need to do this. Is that how you do it? Okay, going off of memory here. So now this will require someone to pass in some text, and when someone does pass in text, we can actually use the context like this, and we can get the database object, and we can get one of our tables down here. In our case, we don't have a table for to-dos, so I'm going to go to the Prisma schema, and we're going to set that up. Now, I do notice there's a .vs code folder that's not ignored by default. I think that should probably be added here. I don't know why that's there, but ignore that because when I'm doing fuzzy searching, I don't want files to show up there. So let's just do that. We'll open up the schema. We're going to make a new model called to-do. And this is going to have a unique identifier. Go ahead and grab ID here. But we also want to type in some text. We want to make some text and probably have it be required. So now what we can do is we're going to go ahead and get that. Actually, no, what we need to do is we need to rerun Prisma migrate. So let's go ahead and open a new tab. I'll say npx Prisma migrate, or actually Prisma push db. This is a shorthand way to kind of do it. npx Prisma db push. I think I had them backwards actually. So that should basically update your schema and all your types, your type definitions, so that when you go here and you do a dot, we should hopefully see a model for to do. And we do, it shows up. Let's say to do, we'll say create, and we need to pass it some data, right? We need to pass that input, which happens to be text. I'll say context dot, actually I'll put an input here, because that's how you get the input for your mutation. And we will go ahead and pass text here. Okay. So if we did this all right, I can wait on this and get the to-do item, and then I can just go ahead and return that to-do item. All right, now if this works perfectly, which I hope it does, I can go back to the UI, and when we submit, we can actually try to send off that information to the backend so it gets persisted in our SQLite database via Prisma. So I'm gonna go ahead and say const create to-do is equal to TRPC. And I'll go ahead and import that from plugins. I'm not sure if that's how you're supposed to do it. So in fact, I think I probably deleted all my stuff. So I'm not sure if this is the proper way to do it, but let's just try it out. Let's just go ahead and, actually, I don't think this is the way you do it. With plugins, I believe you can just do money sign, I forget. You know, let me save this file and go back because I already kind of blew away. But I believe he does this somehow. Actually, I'm not really sure how you do this. Let's see if there's a TRPC. This is the main configuration for TRPC backend. There's a use TRPC composable. Goes to the TRPC client directly without having to call use Nuxt app. Okay, so I did actually get to play with Nuxt a little bit at work today because we are doing like a little experiment with Nuxt and Vue just to kind of see how it is. But I think when you're using Nuxt, you actually have to bring in via a hook. I think you can do like this. Just say app is equal to this, and I'll say app dot. I believe there should be one for TRPC. I think I just might be client. Okay, he calls it client. I think you can also just do this. No? All right, let's just go ahead and destruct that so we have access to it, and I will change that to client. A little bit different from Next.js. I mean, a little bit different naming conventions, but it's nothing that we can't figure out. So now we can do .create to do, and I'll say mutate. Let's see, this one actually requires some input. Okay, so let's actually try to use this. Now, I think his client is actually a little bit different from how TRPC works. Like, I think he has a TRPC plugin here, but he just has like the TRPC client exposed to you directly. So I think if you wanted to use React query with the TRPC, I don't think he kind of like hooks that together. I need to ask him about that. But I believe actually what we can do here is, like I say, use mutation. And let's see if this is something we have access to. Looks like it is. So I think we can go ahead and just pass it a mutation key. So I'll say like create to do. And then I'm going to pass it our mutate function here. I don't remember if this needs to be in like brackets. Probably does, right? Okay, so now I think create to do will have all the React queries, all the view query stuff that we want, like is loading and whatnot. Again, I didn't read through his docs. I'll be honest. I'm just playing around with stuff, and I'm just doing stuff that I feel like would be close enough to TRPC that I can like hit the ground running with. Or sorry, close enough to the T3 stack that I can be productive. But there's stuff that's a little bit different, so you kind of have to relearn some things. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to call mutate async here, and we're going to pass in that text, which again will come from to-do text.value. And that should hopefully send some data over to the backend. And then also what we want to do is let's clear out that input so that if the user wants to type in another to-do, they can do that. Okay, let's make sure this works. I think everything should hopefully work. Let's save this page. I'll type in hello, click enter, go to the network tab, and let's see if it actually did anything. So it made a request to create to-do, and we got back some data. So I think it worked fine. Pretty awesome. We could also spin up our Prisma Studio so that we can inspect that, hey, like did a to-do get created? And we have one here, so we know everything's working fine. Pretty cool. Now, what we want to do is when this page loads, we want to kind of fetch all the to-dos from the backend. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and just say const to-dos is equal to use query, and I'll say like to-dos. And then we're going to go ahead and pass this client dot, oh, I don't have a method for it. All right, so we got to go back to the routers, and we're going to go to add a new procedure here. I'll say get to-dos procedure.query. And we want to basically just use our context, our database object, and we're going to return context db to-do defined mini. I think if you just call it with no options, it'll just give you back everything. Let's try it out. This doesn't need any inputs. I think we can just call it and see what happens. So let's go here. I'm going to call get to-dos, and then I'll say query. I'm not sure why the query thing is like being highlighted in red. I have to figure out why that's the case. You know, I'm not really sure. I have to talk to him. Again, this whole stack is like I think he's still working on it. So there's some things that he has to kind of work on, I believe. Let's just try using the use query here. I would kind of like this to be more consistent with the T3 stack, where like this had a .use mutation or .use mutate. So I didn't have to like set up the query key myself. This seems like a kind of annoying. But then also, if you look at the to-dos here, I'm missing the is loading stuff. Like why is loading not on this? So I need to ask him. I don't know what's going on. But anyway, we can get the data from the to-dos. Like this should fetch data from the backend, and we should be able to render out all the to-dos on the front end. So let's just go here. I'm going to make a UL, and then inside of here, I will say li. And we want to do a v4, and for each to-do in to-dos, yep, dot data, the to-dos dot data, here we go. We should be able to render out the to-do text. Make sure you do doubles. And yeah, that should hopefully work. Now I think you also want like a key here, so I could go ahead and say like to do ID. That should be coming back from the backend, I believe. Now I think this potentially could be undefined, so like I think I want to fall back on an empty array here. Actually, I'm gonna go up here. I'm gonna say like my to-dos. I'm just gonna try something out real quick. What is data set to? Data is a global ref of to-do, an array, or it could be null. So there's a chance that there are no to-dos in this list, right? So what I'm actually gonna do is I want to fall back on, actually, can I just say initial data here? I guess not. All right, so I'm actually gonna do it this way. I'm gonna go ahead and just say to-dos, use query. I'm gonna pass it this function here, and let's see if we can actually just use the to-dos here and get that data. Again, it's saying to-do is possibly undefined. Why is that? What is to-do over here? To-do could be an array of to-dos, or it could be unknown. Is there a way to set some initial data to be like an empty array and then it won't ever be undefined? Like, will this work? All right, Dario, help me out here. I don't know what I'm doing. Let me see if I can make a little hack here. I'll say my to-dos. Kind of a hack, but I wanted to kind of see if I can get this thing working. I'm gonna go to-dos dot data here, or I'm gonna fall back on an empty array. I'm making it computed. This thing will rerun whenever the to-dos change, and I can kind of do more filtering or formatting here in this computed. I'm just doing this because I can't figure out why this TypeScript error is complaining, and I'm going to use that formatted here so that I know that this will always be an array, and then that error will kind of go away. Just refresh the page. So now the to-dos actually come back from the backend, but when I submit new to-dos, I need to tell my page to like reload, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and just call a refetch here, which will basically, you know, tell my page to refetch the data. And I do want to put an async in front of this. I'll put an async await so that it doesn't fetch the data too early. I want to make sure that the to-do is fully created before I fetch it again. I'll say hello, enter world. There we go. So there we have it. We have a really basic to-do list application where you can only add in to-dos, can't delete to-dos. But again, I just wanted to kind of play around with this and see like how well it works. And I think he did a good job. I think there's a couple of things that I'm kind of confused about, a little bit of bugs, but overall, I mean, for the amount of days I think he spent on this, this is like a beautiful start to something that I really like. I like the T3 stack. The only thing is he doesn't have Tailwind, which I can live without, especially with Vue and you have like these scope components. It just, like, writing CSS isn't bad with Vue. It's fun. And there's a lot of flexibility with making like global styles or making scope styles. But overall, I would definitely recommend go check out his project. I will put the description to the project GitHub link below in my description. And you can always join my Discord. I'll probably even make a channel if this gets more traction and people want to talk about this. I'll make a channel directly dedicated to this stack. But yeah, hope you guys enjoyed watching this video. And if you do play around with it, let us know how it is. Let us know if you find any bugs, and I'm sure we can try to work together via open source community to like improve it and make it a little bit better. Anyway, if you enjoyed watching my video, give me a thumbs up, comment, subscribe, press the bell icon, and like always, I mentioned before, I have a Discord that you're welcome to join if you want to talk to me directly or find a place to talk to some other developers. Other than that, have a good day and happy coding.